We come now to the final session of our symposium every year, and every year we use this final session to look back on the previous 2 days. This year, because we're in year 5 of a 5-year cycle, we're also going to look back a little bit on what we've achieved and where we've come and the road we've traveled since 2013. One person is in the room who is in a perfect position to do that, because she is the person who has overseen the organization of all 5 of these symposia. So welcome back to the podium, Ann Miles, Director of Financial Inclusion at the Mastercard Foundation.
What a great debate. So Khalil, thank you for your incredible energy and humor, and also the people who are up here on the stage. It's really brave to do that, and also the people who stood up and spoke. So thank you. It was great. This is always a hard thing to do at the end, is to sort of bring us all together and wrap it up. And actually, I'm not the only one, but who's been working on this symposium for the last 5 years. But I'll get to them later. What I want to do first is start off by saying, you know, we've focused on this theme of client centricity now for 5 years. And as Roger said, we committed to doing this for 5 years. And so one of the neat things we've done, I think every year, for the last 4 years, is we've captured many of you on video. So, you know, this could be good or bad. You get a chance to look at yourself 4 years ago and say, how have I been doing? But it was a great way of, for a quick minute, or even less, getting your own thoughts on client centricity. So why don't we start by showing that video.
It means placing clients at the center of business strategy, at the center of operations, and providing them the products and services that respond to their needs, to their behaviors, and their aspirations. It will require listening to people, understanding the context of their lives, figuring out their needs, and taking those insights and translating them into products that are truly relevant, affordable, and accessible.
Well, I'm glad to tell you, Bob, 75% of the people of Africa have a cell phone.
Yes.
All
right.
And I want 75% of the people of Africa to have a bank account on their cell phone.
Thank you.
That's my vision.
It's easy to take it for granted, and takes a concerted effort for leaders to remain with the heart of the customer at heart, and it's important to be in the field as much as possible so that you are feeling, breathing, and sleeping the customer at all times.
We started by saying we're going to listen to customers and act on their unique insights. Listen to customers, that seems so basic, but we had no sources for tracking voice of the customer input. We weren't actively listening to our customers. We were responding to customer complaints because we had to, because it was a regulatory requirement, but we weren't actively soliciting input from customers. So we set up formal mechanisms to do so.
You know, the behavioral economics and the big data, you know, really provide the key to segmenting clients. And it's really through segmenting clients that we're going to get the power out of data and the power to tailor particular product offering mixes to, you know, people's specific set of needs. It's not a single need, but rather that kind of portfolio.
We call it financial injustice. I think that is what it should be called. Somebody attacked me recently when I called it financial injustice in Kenya. It's unjust to deny a woman a loan because she doesn't have collateral. And because that data does not show you that this woman, Jennifer, can repay, have other There are other qualities that I have that are not financial that you cannot quantify.
But really, let's try to be open, listen, and collaborate to move our agenda in financial inclusion forward. Reminder of what we've done over the last few years. So what I wanted to do was just share with you some of my own reflections of the past 4 years. And this was not the easiest thing to do. I had to go back and read. Thankfully, as you all know, we keep transcripts, and we've written and recorded everything that's been discussed. So I had to go back. I had a nice little pile of paper to read, to go through, and sort of distill and talk with my colleagues about some of the key things that we covered over these past 4 years. And not surprisingly, I think there have been a lot of consistent themes. And for me, interestingly enough, sort of what goes around comes around a little bit. So some of you may have been with us in 2013 when we met Kamal Kadir. He really started our story around client centricity. Some of you may remember him talking about CellBazaar and Bcash. And CellBazaar, as we know at that time, was a technology-enabled solution to help clients obtain bargaining power. Does that sound slightly familiar to maybe a conversation we had yesterday? And in this case, it started by giving fishermen a way to sell their fish on an eBay-type system, as he described it, a virtual marketplace where people could participate in different ways. So he started off by telling us, and that's what led us to invite Kamal at first, to describe CellBazaar, but also Bcash. Bcash was created to address a different problem, and that was that most people in Bangladesh didn't have access to banks, but that over $64 billion in cash was changing hands. Kamal reminded us, and this comes right back to our debate today, that while technology can be great, we don't need to be enslaved by it. And I think he started to foreshadow even that conversation, some of the subsequent conversations that we've had and debated over these last few symposia. So what's interesting to me today, I went and looked up Bcash. Bcash is now the largest mobile financial services provider in Bangladesh, serving 22% of the population and processing 4.5 million transactions a day. CellBazaar, on the other hand, no longer exists. I was rather dismayed to read that, but actually the business closed this year in the spring because they couldn't make the business case. So in that same symposium, we did talk about innovation, but we were reminded by Claudio Gonzalez Vega that innovation may not include all. So again, does that sound familiar? We also talked about developing a deeper understanding of clients, designing effective delivery systems, and making the business case. And we introduced the idea that client centricity was a journey, and we talked more about how to effectively use data. So a lot of the base talking points we started at that symposium. We also had to walk a lot of stairs to get from the top of that floor down to the bottom to get to the stage. In 2014, we went deeper into understanding the client journey. As you saw in the film, we had a good discussion on trust and Strive. Masiuawa from Econet shared his story about how they built Econet Wireless by putting their agents in matatus to understand their client needs. Daryl reminded us that we needed to develop a better sense, a clearer sense of the business problem we were trying to solve. We also talked a lot about leadership and new business models for those serving in poverty, for those living in poverty. How could we serve them better? So again, some consistent themes come back to us year in and year out. So in 2015, we left the beautiful world of Turin and we went to Cape Town. And we focused in that symposium on 3 themes. Leaders motivate employee behavior and internal culture. We need to understand where the client's dropping out along their client journey. And interestingly enough, I think we touched upon that yesterday a little bit in Dennis's microcred discussion. And again, let's come back to the business case. This seems to perpetually haunt us, this topic. Cellulant, you remember our 2 co-founders from Cellulant came up and described their e-wallet system in Nigeria to deliver subsidized electronic vouchers to smallholder farmers on their mobile phones. And the farmers, in turn, use these vouchers to purchase inputs directly from agro-dealers. Ignacio Mas challenged us on some of the assumptions about digital finance. The core problem, he said, is that accounts are empty. The question is not why are they empty, but why did we think they were going to be full in the first place? Digital money, he said, doesn't solve the key issue for clients, which is how to save. I think also you saw the wonderful comments made by, many of us remember Claire Burns, who stood up and talked eloquently about MetLife and how she helped that organization really. She sat in the service center of that life insurance company to talk with customers when they were trying to file their insurance claims, and what a torturous process that was for the client. She really walked us through that process to help us understand how MetLife started to change their own perspective on how to handle clients and how to work with clients and respond to their needs. And that had a subsequent obvious positive effect on their business. We did revisit again, how does leadership promote client centricity? And we came back to this notion of empathy and really understanding and working with clients. And that year, we awarded our first Client at the Center Prize to BIMA, a company located here in Ghana. I don't know if they're in the room. Is a hand slightly going up or no? But doing insurance here in Ghana. So we then moved to 2016, which was our next stop, Rwanda. And if you remember, Eldar Shafir sat on the stage with us and explored scarcity of time or sustenance, and how this undermines poor clients' ability to make decisions and solve problems in a way that is in the best interest of their financial lives. And behavioral nudges, he said, can help. And we just saw, I think this year, one of his colleagues in this world, behavioral sciences, Richard Thalen, get awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. We did talk about client protection. We were challenged, as you saw, by Dr. Jennifer Riria from Kenya Women's Trust. Are we ensuring that women are financially included? We had good debates about what's the trade-off between gathering data from clients, analyzing it, applying insights, versus the need for consumer protection and privacy. Again, themes that resonated with our discussion and debate yesterday on the super platforms. Coming up with a scalable model is about trust in the customer, but also their trust in us, especially low-income people who only have a small amount of money that's disposable to them. You've got to build trust, and data underpins that trust, as well as contact, regular boots on the ground contact with the customer. That's from our friend Nick Hughes at MCOPA. We also talked about the challenges of change management, the great power of partnerships. We brought on board our first regulatory panel because many of you in the room said we need more regulators here as part of this discussion, and that was again continued this morning. And then we awarded our second Client at the Center Prize to Hello Pesa. So it's been, I think, quite a lot to cover around this theme over the past 4 years. Some very consistent topics, some consistent debates, some consistent challenges. I would say that we've landed on what we understand client centricity to be. In spite of what was said yesterday, do we still need to define it? I don't think it needs to be defined precisely. I think many of us will apply how we think about client centricity in our own way as it relates to our own institutions and organizations. So, what I'd like to do before I just share out a few thoughts on the last 2 days, I'd like to call on 3 people, they know who they are, that have been with us along this journey, and just share with us, in a quick minute or so, your own reflections on the last 4 and now 5 years. So Daryl, can I start with you?
Reflecting on what I think we've been hearing over the past few days, I have a sense that there's a crisper sense of both opportunity and caution. I think Graham summed it up well when he said, I think that there's a very real risk of creating a digital divide. And combining 2 thoughts, sort of 2 call-outs, if you will. Chris Locke of Caribou said yesterday, or coined a phrase which I've been hearing tossed around quite a bit. And apparently he did attribute that phrase to his discussions with the Mastercard Foundation about meaningful financial inclusion. And I'd like to tack on to that what Nadeem said about it must have physical, digital, and emotional needs attached to it. So I think this meaningful financial inclusion, that suits physical, digital, and emotional needs. I think we're starting to get a crisper definition of how the direction that we really want to go with our clients. I think also I think we've talked a lot about innovation, and I'd like to call upon yesterday's discussion about super platforms. And I think Amlo Ngueno, my colleague, summed it up very nicely when she said, we have to think very hard about both the noise and the signals coming from super platforms and what we think about them. So a certain amount of this caution, but yet, I don't know about everybody else, but I certainly felt very excited about Juliet saying yesterday, well, we have to embrace the digital revolution. We weren't part of all these other revolutions. It makes sense that we're going to really embrace and maybe even lead in some ways the digital revolution, the revolution now. So it seems to me that in this 5th year, there has been sort of a sense of both this revolution, this innovation, this digital innovation, it's coming, there's inevitability. Yet with what I think are some of the right cautionary notes. And just in case we forget about some of those cautionary notes or client centricity as a whole, I will always have Harriet's voice echoing in my ears, as maybe you all will. As long as it serves us, we can go on with this game, like the ghost of Christmas future. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl. Another person who's been with us, and he saw himself, I'm sure, in the video, Steve Peachy, who's now with, because you were, Savings at the Frontier and Oxford Policy Management.
Hi. Well, first, it was fun. That's the best bit. It was 5 years. I'd rather look back over the 5 years. I think the key thing is the language has grown with us. As you say, you've actually given us a language as to what client centricity means. We don't always use the same words. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that we are trying to put clients at the center, and that has moved on. I always come out of SoFI with one or two things that I'm going to try and do over the next year. It usually takes two, but never mind. Hey? I am worried, though, still about the thing that when I was on stage in 2013, I said it's time to hit the price button. We can't charge 50, 60 cents for a transaction to people who are living literally on $1 a day. Yeah, a typical adult in Ghana has to earn $3 a day to pay for themselves and their family. And we had a good session on the alternative delivery channels on Tuesday. And it's really worrying. The average cost per transaction through agent networks is $1. $1 per transaction. We can't be relevant to the poor if we're going to cost $1 per transaction for people for whom that dollar is in effect one meal for themselves and one meal for the young adult or per a child who's in the family. We've still got to hit the price button. We've got to have the guts to say there's so many unserved out there, we'll probably end up with more revenue if we cut the prices. And that's still the next step for me. And there's too much still to do to squabble between traditional and digital. We all have space in the market to grow. But thank you, Anne. Yeah, it's been real fun 5 years.
Thank you, Steve. And one last person in the back. That's Till Brewitt at UNCDF.
Thank you. And I do want to say thank you to Mastercard Foundation, the fact that I have been here since 5 years. I really appreciate that. And I think what's noticeable to me is you. The demographics and the backgrounds of the people in this room compared to 5 years ago are extraordinarily different. You might remember in Turin, we were doing this at the same time as a Boulder microfinance training. So we were surrounded by microfinance people. And now I would wager that less than half of you, maybe less than 25% of you, work in a microfinance institution. So that's been a big change. So I think it's only appropriate that we ended with this great debate which had echoes of "Make microfinance great again." That being said, I really appreciate the fact that the foundation has tried to keep clients at the center. And I think my observation over the last 5 years is that's really hard. It's really hard to do, and the reason is there's always something else to center around. We forget we started with credit at the center, and then we discovered savings, which for a while was at the center, and that led us into commercialization, which was at the center. And then that led us to concerns, so we went to social performance at the center. And then we had digitization, which moved to the center, which led to payments, which has been at the center. And there was a real risk of going to commerce at the center with this year. And it's just hard to keep clients at the center. And I think one of the things that we're discovering, and I was looking at Bob Christian talking about data and behavioral science. Those are two great tools, but what we've learned about those over the last 5 years is it is very hard to make a mass market product that has a business case and a customer value. It's just really hard. And it may not be possible for a while. We're getting there with technology, but we're not there yet. So what I mean is, while I agree with Graham, we've got an increasingly bifurcated industry, but that's not unique to us. That is a product of our economies. We have an increasingly small percent of people who are having personalized, customized everything, and then we're having a large mass market that is getting standardized, very low human intervention product. So I think the challenge to us is that is the world that we live in. Yes, we do want to work toward changing it, but how do we make the most out of that increasingly widespread, standardized, low intervention product? Let's not give up on it. Because if we really want to put low-income clients at the center, what we need to do is figure out how to crowd in as many of those low-cost, standardized products. And then our challenge is to bundle them in a meaningful way for that target audience and provide them the range of things that they need in a very low-cost way. And I do want to echo Daryl and I think also Tamara, who spoke up here, which is that bundling may not just be financial services, because the fact is most people just can't pay for financial services, maybe other than credit, and even that's questionable. So how do we bundle it not just with financial services, but with the other things that people really need? And maybe by bringing that all together, we can make the most of standardization, low intervention, and low cost.
Thank you, Till. So let me leave you with 3 thoughts as we wrap up SoFI 2017, because I think thanks to Steve, Till, and Daryl, they've already touched on some of the comments I was going to make, so no need to repeat them. But I think, Till, you touched on how the room has changed. First, there are more of us. You know, there are 400, I think, in the room, and you're all mostly still here, which is another thing that either it's because we've located it somewhere you can't go anywhere else, or you just remain engaged, which is wonderful. But the group has changed, too. There are now, when I go back and look at who was in the room in 2013, we had a lot more microfinance institutions. We had 1 M&O, and you were all clamoring, we need more M&Os in the room. And we had other range of players. We had banks, and we had consultants, and we had other funders. But what's interesting about today is just the diversification of who we have in the room. So 2013, we may have had a fintech, but we may not have known who that fintech was. Today, we have 34 fintech players in this room, so go find them. But that has changed. We have fewer microfinance institutions. We have seven, I think, mobile network operators. We've had a few more regulators engage with us, but that's what's been interesting, is just the change in who's in the room. And I think that really points to the fact that the conversations that we're having need to happen with a broader stakeholder group. And I think even bringing someone like Jumia into the room and showing us different ways to solve what customers need, I think is really interesting for us. And I told Dennis at Microcred, I loved his thinking around the undesign notion, which is take away those friction points for clients. Don't always overbuild your product and service, but actually work backwards, what we call, reverse engineering, to get to what your client might be looking for. I was going to tell you a little bit. What's also interesting is how we're being covered, this group. So just to give you an update, there have been 10 million views of the content of SoFI 2017. This is on Twitter. We are trending in the top spot in 4 countries. Of course, Ghana, where we are right now, Kenya, South Africa, and Canada. So that's really exciting, too. I don't think we even tweeted. Did we tweet in 2013? I'm sure we did, but in a very small way. But anyway, I thought those are interesting ways of thinking about where we're moving. And just a final point. As I said yesterday in the opening remarks, we really do need to anticipate the future. It is hard for me to think about it, but even when we were talking about disruptive financial services. I was thinking, how come no one's raising their hand about like the old-fashioned ATM? That was pretty disruptive. How about certificates of deposit? Those were disruptive. Now, they didn't serve poor people, I know that, so that's a big caveat. But I do think financial service providers do have the capability and the creativity, partnering with others to anticipate the future. And I just say that as a really old, long-term banker who's been at this for 30-plus years. And I've seen all the changes. And they can be positive. So I think we need to continue to anticipate the future. In our perspective, you know, for us, and I remember Samuel Mambo talking about this in SoFI1, it is a world, I think someone else mentioned it over the course of the last day and a half. In Africa, it is a very young demographic. So it will be a world, for those of us working here, of young clients. So we will need, they have bigger and higher expectations. They'll demand new solutions. So we will need, at least those of us working in this continent, in these countries, we will need to anticipate what their needs are. One colleague, I think Sumaya, offered the suggestion that you may want to hire a futurist in each of your organizations, if you can. Or either that or hire a really young person who's thinking ahead for you. So with that, those are my final comments on SoFI. I do want to thank now a couple of people who've always helped us make this happen every year, year in and year out. First of all, I'd like to thank the financial inclusion team, who've done a lot of work working with many of you on the panels, the side events, helping us develop the content, so thank you. I want to thank our communications team. They've always put together a tremendous event. Our speakers have been fabulous, so thank you. And all of you, incredible participants, thank you. I know there's more clapping to be done. Fidelity Bank, who really helped us. There's William. We had a tremendous advisory committee who we consulted on the content and the structure of the symposium, so thank you all very much for your time and dedication. We had prize judges, so those great 3 finalists, and then JUMO, we had a group of wonderful prize judges who committed their time and dedication to that effort. This wonderful group of people walking around in the white shirts with Symposium. These are Millennium, who helped really orchestrate so much of the coming and going and all of our logistics. Thank you. And finally, QAV, who gets all of this done, all the lighting, sets up our stages, our microphones. They're amazing too. So thank you all. So with that, goodbye, and back to Roger.
Final words for you. Again, some logistics thing, information you need to know. First of all, the survey is on your table. Please fill in the survey. There are 2 pieces of paper. They will be collected as you walk out the door by those fantastic people in white shirts who belong to Millennium. As you walk out, this is your ticket, as I said, and we will certainly use all of that information as we plan future events. Please leave the clickers on the table. Yesterday we were short by 7 clickers. Apparently that's quite a bad thing to have. So if you inadvertently swept a clicker into your bag overnight, would you have a look at it and leave it on the table? But leave all the clickers on the tables, please. You are all cordially welcomed to the Cedar Garden for a cocktail, a closing cocktail after this. You are all cordially welcome there. It's in the same place as the welcome cocktail on Tuesday night, which is just off of the lobby, just off of the registration outside. And we will be very happy to either continue the conversation or continue another conversation with you, but you're all cordially welcome there. For those of you who are going to the airport, I know this is important information, there will be shuttles leaving for the airport from this hotel and from the Movenpick Hotel every 20 minutes from now until midnight tomorrow night. Midnight, Friday night. Every 20 minutes, all night, all day, from both hotels. So you can get a shuttle to the airport. If you are at the Movenpick and you want to go back, there will be shuttles leaving for the Movenpick from the lobby here until 8 o'clock tonight. I think the last shuttle leaves at 8 o'clock tonight, is that right? Yes, in that area, all right. Finally, well, not finally, I wanted to share with you that we have, Anne had mentioned traditionally at the end of every SoFI, we play a little video. And we've done it again this time. We've stopped a number of you in the corridors outside. We've asked you a question. We've asked you to complete a sentence. And before I say my final goodbye, I just want our friends in the audiovisual QAV to play the video of the people that we talked to at this symposium.
To move financial inclusion ahead.
To move financial inclusion ahead.
To move financial inclusion ahead, we really need to talk about the risk of financial exclusion. How does it affect the lives of the people we're trying to reach?
To move financial inclusion ahead, we really need to talk about fulfilling the needs of the client. We need to talk about mobile financial services and how we use digital products to serve the customer.
We really need to talk about pricing, especially digital pricing of loan products.
We really need to talk about emerging and promising approaches to innovations such as human-centered design and behavioral diagnostic and design.
To move financial inclusion ahead, we need to talk about the base of the pyramid.
To move financial inclusion ahead, we really need to talk about keeping the client first.
We really need to talk about value. Value at the customer level, value at the firm level, and value at the level of society.
We really need to talk about financial wellness, our consumers' physical, digital, and emotional needs.
To move financial inclusion ahead, we really need to talk about how we're going to make partnerships work.
We really need to talk about designing services and products specifically for women.
We really need to talk about those big life goals, but more importantly, we need to focus on the pathway and the details of the pathway to getting there.
To move financial inclusion ahead, we really need to talk about how finance can solve real problems in the lives of customers by addressing their real needs.
How does it affect the larger economy and the contribution of each and every person?
We actually really need to talk about how do we retain our clients and how do we work with partners to serve their needs.
So as you move out, as you complete your surveys and leave and go to the cocktail, you will know what you have to talk about as well, some other ideas for you about what we need to do in financial inclusion. Finally, one word, as you return home and as you go back to your offices, I would ask you to keep these cards, the badges that you've been given, and to look at them from time to time. And think of the client, think of the personality, the story that you heard, the story you've heard about their life, and think about her or him from time to time and the dreams and the hopes that that person has and how that applies to the work that you are doing. So you've been a fantastic audience. Thank you. Travel safely, go home, and we hope to see you at another occasion. Thank you very much. Good night.